Hey, everybody out there. We're back again with more on the Ellen Greenberg case, the Philadelphia school teacher who was found stabbed 20 times, 10 in the chest and in the stomach region, 10 in the back of her neck, including the spinal cord. And this is back in January of 2011. And what the issue is whether it was a suicide or a homicide. And Josh Shapiro, the AG of Pennsylvania, now running for governor, has been insisting twice that it was a suicide. No need to reopen the case. No need to research the matter further. But Tom Brennan is with us, as you can see on the screen, and he's a former state policeman and investigator. Long career in law enforcement, a lot of skills in investigation. And Tom, all along, has said that something really doesn't add up here. And so now there's been a new development. Until now, it's been in the hands of Shapiro, the AG of Pennsylvania, but now it's going to Chester County, supposedly out of Shapiro's hands. So Tom, explain how that happened. How did it get transferred out of the authority of the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, now into Chester County and the DA of Chester County? How did that happen?
Okay. Mr. Shapiro's office, the Attorney General's office, had the case. It was referred to them by Mr. Krasner, the DA of Philadelphia.
Right.
Because Mr. Krasner was the parents of he was the attorney for the parents of the victim.
Originally, before
well,
he...
there was so there was a conflict initially, so he referred the case to the Attorney General's office.
Okay, so
the Attorney General has had the case for approximately 4 years.
Okay, Krasner was a private attorney at the time. He took up the Greenberg case, the parents of Ellen Greenberg, the woman who was found dead. And then he became the district attorney. So that created a conflict of interest and referred it to Shapiro's office, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and now, why is it no longer in Shapiro's office?
Well, we have learned that Mr. Shapiro and members of the fiance's family, the Goldberg family, and the prominent attorney, James Schwartzman, who is a judge on the State Judicial Review Board.
And also the uncle of the fiancé, Ellen Greenberg, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
His daughter, Mr. Schwartzman's daughter, and Mr. Shapiro attended the same high school together. Okay. They also later on, Miss Schwartzman married an individual by the name of Kimmel. The Kimmel family, we found that there were some political donations to Mr. Shapiro by the Kimmel family. Also, we have some photographs showing that Mr. Shapiro and the daughter of Mr. Schwartzman served on the same gala fundraising committees for their high school that they attended. And there are other donations that we found from Richard Goldberg, who is the father of the fiancée. There are also political donations from him, and some others connected with the fiancé's family.
Okay, in a minute we'll get to the significance of the fiancé and also of Schwartzman, the lawyer uncle of the fiancé, who's Sam Goldberg. Now, why is that? Is that something that you would think that Shapiro would have been aware of? He would have remembered about this kind of association, which would create at least the appearance of a conflict of interest?
You would have thought that he did, but it wasn't until these facts came out on social media that his office came out and said that to avoid, although there isn't a conflict of interest, to avoid any conflict of interest, they were referring the case after over 4 years back to the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office.
Which is Krasner, who recused himself once because of his conflict of interest.
Right, right.
So then from Krasner, it went to Chester County because Krasner has a conflict of interest too, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now
Yes.
also Shapiro's office said in terms of this coming out, the connections and the potential conflict of interest, he says it's been referred back to the Philly DA's office due to the quote appearance of a conflict of interest that had arisen, though a spokesperson for the office said that no such conflict actually existed. It sounds pretty much like it does exist, right, in black and white.
Yes, yes. If you take a look at the connections and the political contributions, there's definitely, the evidence is there.
And also, I mean, wouldn't Shapiro have been aware that it was referred once to, it was in the hands once of Krasner, who said he washes his hands because of his conflict of interest, being the original lawyer for the family. So, I mean, all right, why would he refer it back to Krasner when he knew Krasner's own conflict of interest?
Well, according to law, okay, if there is a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with the Attorney General's office, once a case is referred to them, they are obligated by law to refer it back to where it originated, and the originator must then refer it out to a contiguous county.
Okay, so that was a matter of form, which they did follow in that,
Yes.
in that aspect. And the contiguous county is Chester County, which is right outside of Philly, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
now,
There's Bucks County, Montgomery County, Delaware County, and Chester County.
okay, now you and others have been trying for years now to get this case reopened, to have the medical examiner's finding of suicide changed to either undetermined or homicide. And twice, Josh Shapiro has rejected that and insisted that it was suicide, correct?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
so now that it's out of his hand and in Chester County, and the Chester County DA will be handling it from now on, since Shapiro is the DA, the Attorney General of the entire state of Pennsylvania, could he still have some kind of an influence on how the investigation is conducted in Chester County?
Once he would divest himself of the case, you would think that there would not be any contact between his office and the district attorney's office of Chester County, simply because he divested himself of the case because of a conflict of interest, appearance of a conflict of interest. Now, you would think if he now inserts himself into the investigation, there is a conflict of interest. There would be a conflict of interest.
Is there any way
So,
of knowing whether he would insert himself one way or another, even if he's conferring with Chester County DA? If they were even, or if they call him and say, well, we're looking at this part of the case. You had some dealings with it. What do you think? I mean, could that occur?
it could occur. Yes, it could.
There.
Yes, it could. And when you take a look at things, Mr. Krasner is a Democrat. Mr. Shapiro is a Democrat. The district attorney of Chester County is a Democrat. Okay? So just from a political standpoint. And from what I understand, and looking at the reputation of District Attorney Ryan from Chester County, I don't think that she would in any way participate in something that would be give the appearance of some type of improper participation in an improper investigation.
Contact. But again, Tom, you as an investigator and the attorney representing the Greenbergs, would you necessarily know whether any of that contact occurs?
Not unless there was some type of whistleblower, or we had some type of someone would come forth and inform us that there was contact made between the parties.
Okay, Tom, now let's, for those our viewers out there who are not too familiar with the case, not being in the Philadelphia area, let's talk now about the significance of these two individuals, Sam Goldberg, the fiance of Ellen Greenberg, and also attorney Schwartzman, who is the lawyer uncle of Sam Goldberg. Now, why is Sam, the fiance, what was his part in all this? Why is he something should be part of what occurred? It should be, we should.
Well, he's a person of interest. He's a person of interest, as there are others.
Has he been named officially a person of interest?
No. But as a U.S. attorney once said to me, Tom, tell me why we always look at the victims, in these cases, the victim's partner, husband, or fiance. Why do we take a look at them first? I said, because 99 out of 100 times, they're the individuals that are responsible.
All right, so Tom.
But there's always that one time when they aren't.
All right, so again, we're not making any direct accusations, but
No.
you're saying that he should be considered a person of interest.
Yes.
Okay, why?
Because of the behavior that took place.
Which was what?
If he says, he makes a statement that he left the apartment. Ellen Ray Greenberg was a school teacher.
Okay. And the apartment
as a result of a snowstorm, basically a blizzard. It was one of the largest snowstorms that ever hit Philly. Her school had an early dismissal.
This was in 2011, January.
Yes. January 26th.
Okay, now they shared an apartment in Manayunk, which is really part of Philadelphia, right?
Yes.
Okay, so she comes home early from school because snow dismissed classes early. And what happened from there?
Then supposedly her fiance, Sam Greenberg, was out at Goldberg, and he came in shortly after she got home. Sometime later on in the afternoon, Mr. Goldberg states that he left the apartment and went down to the gym on the bottom floor of the apartment building. He returned to the apartment about 30 minutes later and could not make entrance into the apartment. He had a key fob, the door opened, but there was a sliding bar locked on the door like you have it in a hotel room. And he made 7 or 8 calls to the victim. He supposedly hollered into the apartment. He called the victim's parents at their home in Harrisburg, letting them know he couldn't get into the apartment. We have some witnesses who state that they saw him in the hallway walking, and from the verbiage that the witnesses said they overheard, if you listen to the 911 call, that's the verbiage that he's stating on the 911 call. So he was walking in the hallway when he made the 911 call. He wasn't in the apartment. So there are different things that would lead one to believe to make, also, when he said he did make entrance, he made the statement to the police that he was accompanied by the concierge, that he went down to the first floor and asked the concierge to assist him with making entry. Well, I interviewed the concierge, and the concierge denies that. And we also took a look at the security video that the police provided us with, and you can see very plainly that the concierge never leaves the first floor. So
the officials later said, from what I understand, well, it could have been somebody else in the building that accompanied them to force the door open, but apparently they never tried to find out who that other person might have been, correct?
No, there wasn't any other. There is only one concierge. Okay.
Oh, okay. Now, also, he made the call from the hallway, and but yet the 911 call would lead one to think that he was in the apartment when he discovered her. He broke into the apartment, and that's when he discovered her body. She was slumped on the floor, and but what you're saying is the 911 call might have actually been made in the hallway, and
Yes.
in the hallway, if he wasn't in the apartment, he wouldn't have been describing the scene, correct?
Yes. Yes.
All right, another anomaly, or at least a curious item here, is that he actually called his uncle, the lawyer, also the president judge of the Judicial Review Board in Philadelphia. He called him first from the hallway before he called 911, correct?
Okay. We do have evidence from his cell phone records and an attorney that's supposedly representing him that he did call his uncle or his cousin, who is Mr. Schwartzman, the prominent attorney uncle. Kamian Schwartzman is the son of Mr. Schwartzman. And that when he called Kamian Schwartzman, Kamian put it on speaker, and Kamian and Mr. Schwartzman were advising him on what he should do.
Now, how do you know that?
That's what their attorney said. That's the attorney that's supposedly representing the Schwartzmans.
Schwartzman's attorney is confirming that Mr. Schwartzman and a cousin were on the phone advising him of
Yes, this individual says, please be advised that I represent James Schwartzman, Kamian Schwartzman, and Richard Goldberg, the father of the fiance. Okay? So if this individual is representing him, okay, he states that Sam, prior to making a 911 call, called Kamian, and then Kamian, once he told Kamian what was going on, that he couldn't get in the apartment, then Kamian put his father on, James Schwartzman, the prominent attorney uncle, and they both listened to what he had to say and were giving him advice.
Any details on what the advice was?
No.
Okay, so they could have merely been advising him like how to get into the apartment or to call police, call the concierge, correct?
He said, this attorney makes the statement in correspondence that they were the ones that advised him to force open the door and make entry.
Well, that sounds innocent enough.
You would think. You would think.
But now you have it confirmed that he called 911 outside in the hallway rather than in the apartment.
We have witnesses that said that they saw him in the hall and he was on the phone, and from the verbiage he was using in the hallway was basically the same verbiage that's on the 911 call. So, you know, as one individual said, okay, if this is true, what he is saying on the 911 call is bullshit. And
Okay.
you have to listen to the 911 call.
Okay, now let's break down the 911 call. What sticks out about that in your mind in terms of something possibly not adding up?
Okay, there are things like describing one of the things that he does is he describes the victim as being on her back. And you look at the crime scene photograph, she is not on her back. Okay.
Well, I mean, her back is against the bottom of the kitchen cabinet.
Yeah.
So
he says she's flat on her back.
Flat.
And then the individual on the phone says, well, you're going to have to, we want you to start CPR. Do you know how to administer CPR?
This
and
this is the 911 person receiving the call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The individual on the 911 call, the telephone operator.
Yeah.
He says that she's on her back. She said, okay, do you know how to administer CPR? He says, no. She said, okay, I'll walk you through it. He said, do I have to? I guess I have to. She said, yes. Now, this is a woman that the love of your life that you're going to marry.
But they were engaged. They set a wedding date.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They had saved the date for their wedding the following August.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, they ask you to do CPR and you say, do I have to? Okay. Now, he kneels down supposedly he says he kneels down beside her, and then it's, oh, she has a knife in her chest. She has a knife in her heart. You know, if you listen to the 911 call, it as one assistant district attorney from the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office stated, it is the weirdest 911 call you'll ever listen to.
Or what was the significance of saying, oh, there's a knife? Didn't he also say it looks like she either fell on the knife or committed suicide or stabbed herself?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I mean, why was that peculiar? At the way he said it, at the sequence in which he said it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, to begin with, when you take a look at that crime scene, as soon as you walk through the door, you see the victim, and the knife is very, very prominently displayed. You can't miss it.
It wasn't under her clothing. It was sticking through her outer clothing, correct?
Through her outer clothing.
Yeah. So in other words, what you're saying, right. You know, you would assume that he could not have missed it. It would have been the first thing he saw before he knelt down beside her and then seemingly descended then, correct?
Yes, yes, yes. You know, I mean, so, you know, with all of that, okay, and then you take a look at the victim, and the victim is propped up in the corner, almost in a sitting upright position.
Now, why do you
Okay.
propped up rather than just slumped against the bottom of the counter? It could have been the way she collapsed.
No, they're not. She was moved because you can see with the one of the first things you see on her face is dried and coagulated blood. That dried and coagulated blood runs from her nose horizontally to her ear.
So,
Now it's dried and coagulated.
and it's horizontal like this.
Yes.
It's not going down.
No, it's not vertically.
So
It's
that
not
would,
vertical.
so that would indicate the body was moved.
Yes. That's one of the first things you see as an investigator when you walk through the door.
Mhm.
Okay. I interviewed the EMS fireman who was the first individual through the door that night in response to the 911 call, and he verified that yes, she was in that position when he arrived. So she wasn't on her back; she was sitting up against the cabinets in the kitchen.
Yeah. But the first thing, yeah, I mean, and again, what he said was, oh, it looks like she either fell on her knife or stabbed herself, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, also, Tom, other things that really stand out as extremely peculiar was the chain of evidence. Now, this occurred on
This occurred January 26th.
2011 at
She
7
was
a.m.
pronounced. She was pronounced at 6:40 in the evening.
6:40 in the evening. But that was after the EMTs came.
Yes,
Pronounced.
the EMTs got there, and the EMTs pronounced her at 6:40 p.m.
Okay, so when is the body removed?
The body is not removed because of the snowstorm. The police wagon did not get to remove the victim until approximately 2 or 3 in the morning.
Okay, so that would be
Of the 27th.
of the next day, the 27th, right?
Yes.
January 27th.
Yes.
Okay. In the meantime, what happens to the apartment? You know, the evidence that's there, the blood stains, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens from here?
There weren't any forensics done at all by the police department. They did place a female officer at the door until such time as the victim was removed for autopsy. Okay, once the victim was removed at 2 or 3 in the morning, that individual officer left. So there was no security at all on the apartment.
So that scene was unsecured, not in police observation. Okay.
Right.
And then what happens?
So when the property manager reported for work the next morning, she received a call from Mr. Schwartzman, and he requested permission to get into the apartment to get a suit and shoes for the victim's funeral the following day on the 28th. She said that she would have to contact the police to get permission to allow him in the apartment. So the property manager called the police, the supervisor that she was dealing with, and that individual told her yeah, it's fine. Leave them in. Let them in. Allow them to come in. And she said, well, the scene is all bloody and everything. And, what should I do about that? And he said, well, that's not our responsibility. Um, that's yours or the renters. And she said, well, can you give me some advice on what I should do? He said, well, you can call some people like crime scene cleanups and they'll send some folks over and, clean it up. So she called crime scene cleanups and they sent 2 women over, and those 2 women cleaned and sanitized the apartment. And there evidently were some knives in the sink in the kitchen, and the property manager said she observed the women taking all the knives in the kitchen and putting them in a dishwasher and running them through the dishwasher.
And they cleaned up any of the blood stains and all
They
that.
cleaned up all the blood stains on the cabinets, the counters, the floor. So they cleaned and sanitized the entire crime scene.
All right, so just so our listeners know, this crime scene cleanup crew, they're not official. They're not taking notes. They're not showing exactly the layout and all that. They're just cleaning up the thing without police supervision, correct?
Right.
So the police
Right.
the police haven't even gone through that evidence, and it's being cleaned up by
No.
civilians.
The police they haven't done any forensics at all on the scene.
But so how could this happen? I mean, isn't this totally contrary to proper procedure?
Right. It's contrary to basic death investigation.
All right, so all that evidence has been cleaned up, altered, washed away, disappeared, whatever. Then when
But now what the property manager and her maintenance supervisor did was they made a video of the entire scene, okay, the entire apartment, to protect the owners of the apartment complex.
and this was before
No one could say that they removed anything or anything, okay?
and this was before the cleanup crew came.
Before the cleanup crew came.
So they have a video before it was cleaned up.
Yes. So
Okay.
now, once the police show up on the 28th with the search warrant to search the apartment, okay, and the forensics team is there, the supervisor, the police supervisor, learns from the property manager that she made a video of the scene. He said, well, he thanked her, and she gave him the copy of the video. Okay. Well, in the course of this investigation, Mr. Pedraza, the attorney representing the Greenbergs, requested a copy of that video from the police. Well, that video doesn't exist. The police said it doesn't exist.
So
They don't have it.
nobody has the original or a copy.
No.
And when the police say it doesn't exist, does that mean they don't know what happened to it or it never existed?
They don't know what happened to it. We do have a witness that made the video, and we do have that witness, those 2 witnesses that say they turned it over to the police, but the police say they don't have it.
But I mean, do they say they lost it or just never had it? Just what?
The city's response to Mr. Pedraza was that it doesn't exist.
All right. So when did the police start their forensic examination of the apartment?
They started on the 28th.
2 days
And
after.
it's still, every time I see a video of that apartment building, it's a video of January 28th when the Philadelphia Police Department forensics team are all over that apartment and that apartment building. Okay? It's the morning of the 28th.
2 days
When-
after the death.
Yes, and when this crime scene has been cleaned and sanitized.
Again, how could they account for that kind of obviously sloppy procedure or violation of a proper procedure? Do they?
Beyond me, beyond me.
They don't even try to justify it.
Pardon me?
They don't even try to justify it.
No, no, no. They can't. There isn't any way you can. Now, what you have to go back to the 27th now, when the prominent attorney uncle and another individual show up.
Mr.
Okay?
Schwartzman and
Mr. Schwartzman,
and the,
who is an ethics attorney and a judge on the State Judicial Review Board. Okay?
and as a judge of the Judicial Review Board, he would be reviewing lawyer behavior and any breaches of professional ethics, correct?
Yes, yes.
So he goes in as a lawyer, and he has no problem with entering the scene and taking 2 laptops, Ellen's, her
Yes,
cell
he
phone.
leaves with the victim's cell phone, the victim's personal laptop, the victim's work laptop, and the fiance's laptop.
And what?
And the victim's engagement ring, which supposedly was a extremely valuable heirloom of the Goldberg family, remain in plain view on the counter in the bathroom.
All right, now the Goldberg or the Greenberg family?
The Goldberg family.
Oh,
It was a very, very supposedly an extremely valuable heirloom.
Of the fiance's family.
Fiance's family.
Okay.
Now you remove all the electronics and a cell phone, but you leave this extremely valuable engagement ring there.
Mm-hmm.
So don't tell me that you were taking them for safekeeping. Okay? The individuals who removed those devices knew exactly what they were doing, because don't tell me that this prominent attorney uncle didn't know about the chain of evidence. Okay?
And there were never any repercussions of those actions by him, by Mr. Schwartzman.
No.
He wasn't called before the Ethics Review Board, which he was not president of at the time, but certainly as an experienced lawyer, one would assume he would know that that's just not kosher behavior.
Right. Right.
Okay. All right. So where does it go from here? So the uncle, who was with the uncle?
That we don't know. We know there was another individual, but we don't know exactly who. That may
Okay, so the uncle walks and the other individual, they walk off with this material that should be examined as evidence, right?
Yes.
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 So
Should have
that's
been secured by the Philadelphia forensics team.
all right. And do the police ever get their hands on those electronic devices?
Yes, they approached Mr. Schwartzman and they were returned on the 29th. They were removed on the 27th and they were returned to the police on the 29th.
And is there any way of telling whether any of the material, the data on those devices were altered or removed?
You can't tell that. And in any court, since the chain of evidence was broken, okay, no, there isn't a court where they would, excuse and permit that evidence in.
All right, Tom, the layman might ask, with their limited knowledge of evidentiary rules and procedures, police procedures, how a case is put together, one might wonder, the layman might wonder, with all of this going on, how did the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania, who trumpets himself as this big crime fighter and straight shooter, how is it possible that he twice insisted that this was a clear-cut suicide with all these discrepancies preceding this?
Well, there were a number of, okay, first of all, they came out with a statement saying that they did another forensic. There was the initial forensic analysis of the victim's laptop was done by the Philadelphia Police Department, sent it to the FBI lab to have a forensic analysis done on the laptop. That analysis came back. The police said the analysis came back, and in a police report it states there was no evidence of suicide, nothing relating to suicide found on the laptop. Okay. Well, the first thing that comes out of the Attorney General's office is they had another forensic analysis done by the FBI, and the FBI found these statements and found these searches where the victim was searching, sites like regarding suicide and painless death and things like that, and taking a look at other medications that might cause suicide. So as a result of that, okay, the attorney representing the Greenbergs at the time was Walter Cohen, who also was a former state attorney general. Well, Walter Cohen arranged a meeting with the representatives from the Attorney General's office, and the representatives were Michelle Henry, who I believe was identified as the Chief of Staff for the Attorney General, and Jennifer Selber, who was the Deputy Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Investigation Division. Okay. Now, Jennifer Selber was also, prior to her employment at the Attorney General's office, way back in January 26, 2011, she was the deputy district attorney in charge of the homicide prosecution unit in the DA's office. That's when this incident occurred. So why she didn't recuse herself is beyond me. But anyway, Michelle Henry and Jennifer Selber were at that meeting. And the one thing that as they said, because of this analysis that they had, it was obvious that the victim was contemplating suicide.
But that was not originally found in the original analysis by the FBI.
No.
So that suddenly was discovered.
They said that they had a second analysis done by the FBI, and it was discovered in the second analysis. Okay.
Now, the medication she was on, in terms of combination, could that have induced, a stupor and suicidal thoughts, depression, whatever?
No, we had an expert look into that, and they took a look at the toxicology report on the victim, and the amount of medication that was found in the victim was not above normal limits. And normal limits would not in any way cause an individual to commit suicide.
All right, Tom, let's get to the stab wounds, the number of them and the nature of them and the significance of 20 stab wounds.
Yeah,
No.
but can I finish about the meeting
Yeah.
with the Attorney General's office?
Okay.
Okay, I began to question Michelle Henry and Jennifer Selber regarding this analysis that they said they had done. Okay, and it became obvious from my questioning that they knew nothing about how a forensic analysis was conducted or done. Because I said to them, how could you conduct a forensic analysis when I know where those laptops and cell phone have been since a certain date? And that date was prior to you people getting involved in this case. So you didn't have access to those devices.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, what they failed to realize is that when you do a forensic analysis and the FBI in the lab, what they do is they clone the hard drive of that device. So they never work on the actual hard drive. They work on the clone. So they didn't even know that the FBI had a clone, not the actual device. Okay? And I said to them, so, you know, how could you have this conducted when you didn't have the device? With that, they said to me, you know, well, we'll just, I said, all I want to see is a copy of the report. Let me have a copy of that report. The next day, Michelle Henry called Walter Cohen and said, I instructed Christopher Phillips, who was the senior deputy attorney general in charge of the investigation. She said, I instructed him to provide you with a copy of that analysis. To this day, we have never gotten that analysis.
Wow.
Okay.
All right.
And we obtained a copy of the analysis by the FBI, the first one, but the FBI never provided, saying they did a second one.
Hmm.
So that's a lie.
All right, let's move on to the stab
Okay.
wounds. 20 stab wounds, 10 in her stomach and chest area, one right through the heart, a 10-inch kitchen knife.
Yeah.
And also 10 in her back and several in the spinal column, correct?
Yeah. Yes, there's two. One severs the dura in the spinal cord, and it goes in an upward direction, upward.
And
Excuse me.
what's significant about the upward angle?
Because it is impossible to get a knife in that position to inflict that kind of wound
By yourself.
by yourself.
All right. Now, also significant was one or two of the stab wounds was determined inflicted posthumously after
Okay.
death by
Right.
by a medical examiner that the city of Philadelphia itself hired, correct?
Yeah. Dr. Emery, a
Lindsay,
neuroforensic pathologist who was hired by the city of Philadelphia and instructed by Dr. Galino, who was the director of the medical examiner's office. She was instructed by Dr. Galino to perform some tests, some examinations on some specimens that they had in the office, still had in the office. Dr. Emery performed the exam, and during we conducted a deposition with Dr. Emery, And under oath, Dr. Emery said that the one wound lacked hemorrhage. And when she was asked by Mr. Pedraza, what does that mean when you don't have hemorrhage? Well, you don't have pulse. And Mr. Pedraza said, well, if you don't have pulse, then the victim was dead. She said, yes, the victim was dead when that wound was administered. Now, how could the dead victim administer a wound to the back of her neck?
Well, now, was it one wound?
And
Was it one wound or two wounds that might have been posthumous?
there was definitely one. Definitely one.
Possibly
Possibly two.
two. Okay, now I understand that Mr. Shapiro kind of wrote that off by saying that something to the effect that Lindsay Emery, the medical examiner who came up with this conclusion, misspoke, but didn't explain in detail what that meant, correct?
Yes, that was the response that they gave us. They didn't look at it as being significant evidence that you have a post-mortem wound. They looked at it and said, well, Dr. Emery misspoke. Now, what do you mean by she misspoke? She was under oath. So
Are they trying to say that although she determined it was inflicted after death, it was really somewhat nebulous whether that could be confirmed?
yeah. Now she was deposed in November of 21. She performed these examinations in August of 19. Now, why did it take that long when we asked the medical examiner's office to perform those exams? The exams were performed, but the information was never given to us. We didn't learn about it until we deposed Dr. Emery.
Hmm. But was that the actual word they used? Misspoke? She misspoke?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
but didn't explain what that meant.
No.
So are they calling into question the validity of her conclusion, or just that it wasn't phrased correctly, or what?
God only knows they just said she misspoke regarding that examination.
Yeah.
And she was instructed by Dr. Galino when she performed these examinations not to submit a report. Now, why would you ask someone in your office to perform an examination and then not document it?
Now, the original medical examiner who first said it was a homicide, then changed it to suicide, he didn't find any posthumous wounds, right?
No, but he did preserve the specimens.
And that's what Dr. Emery looked at, examined.
Yes.
That, yeah.
Yes.
So that's another peculiarity. What else doesn't add up in your mind?
If you take a look at the autopsy report, one of the reasons why they said that they changed it from homicide to suicide, there's a paragraph in the autopsy report that says that the spinal cord specimen was examined by Dr. Lucy Rourke Adams, and Dr. Adams stated that the wound was not sufficient enough and the victim could continue to self-harm. Okay? So I contacted Dr. Rourke, and when I first spoke to her on the phone, she said, Tom, I'll be more than happy to meet with you, but I'm going in for a back operation tomorrow, and can we wait until I'm back after recuperation? I said, yes. So I waited several months and I called her again. And she said, Tom, about this Ellen Ray Greenberg case. She said, I've been reading, what's in the newspapers and, on television. She said, I want you to know, she said, there isn't any sense in you and I meeting. And Dr. Rourke is, she's a downright, this is it. This is the way it is. That's it. And she said, I want you to know that I know nothing about the Greenberg case. I never had anything to do with the Greenberg case. And if I would have had anything to do with the Greenberg case, I would have submitted a report and I would have submitted an invoice for my work. So she said, if a report doesn't exist and an invoice doesn't exist, I didn't do anything with that case.
So in other words, you're suggesting that her report was actually generated falsely by Shapiro's office. She never did a report.
No, that was generated by the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's office. Okay, and that paragraph in there is a fraudulent paragraph because there isn't any report regarding her examination, and there isn't any invoice where she was paid for her work. The first assistant, the assistant district attorney for the prosecutor's office that I befriended that looked at this case initially in the DA's office before Mr. Krasner went into the office, he says that one of the first things he noticed was this report regarding this examination was missing. So he called the Philadelphia Police Department and said, hey, where's the copy of this report? And they said, we don't have any. So he said he called the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's office and said, I don't have a copy of it. Where's a copy of this report? And they said it doesn't exist. So, and in deposition, Dr. Rourke was working at CHIP, the Children's Hospital, and Dr. Osborne said that he walked the specimen over to Children's Hospital, and Dr. Rourke did what they referred to as a roadside exam or a curbside exam, where she just glanced at it and gave her opinion. And Dr. Rourke says, no, that never happened.
Wow.
So.
I mean, I don't know what to ask next about this. Well, yeah, here's a question. Why do you think the case was handled this way by Shapiro's office when there's so many loose ends to it? And he insisted twice that it's a suicide. It was presented to him twice by the family to reconsider the medical examiner's finding of suicide and either change it to homicide or undetermined. Twice his office was asked that. Twice he supposedly reviewed all the material and twice came to the same conclusion, suicide. So yes. Why do you think he's handling it that way with all these discrepancies and loose ends, sloppy procedures, errors in the way the evidence was handled, the chain of custody broken? With all this, why is he so insistent twice that it was suicide?
PMPP.
Which is?
Politics, money, power, and privilege.
All right, so Tom, you clearly think that there is much more to investigate that hasn't been investigated properly or not at all in this case. Now, it's in Chester County. What do you think is going to happen there? More of the same, or is this a breakthrough for you and Attorney Pedraza, who's representing the Greenberg family, after 11 years of asking for a real, thorough, complete investigation? It's now supposedly out of Shapiro's hands. What do you think is going to happen from here?
The parents are elated for the change. They're elated about the change. Mr. Pedraza feels very positive about the change. And when I know I'm familiar with the work of, some of the investigators within her department. And I've vetted District Attorney Ryan, and she's a very she's a very hard worker. She's been very successful as a prosecutor. She handles a very, very difficult and busy office. So I feel pretty positive about it. And I believe that there are just too many eyes on this case now for anyone, to tamper with it improperly.
Tom, now Shapiro is running for governor, and it's well known, at least in the Philadelphia media, that he's been insisting on suicide. Now, if that finding is overturned, how is that going to impact his run for governor?
Frankly, I don't care. No, I'll be very frank with you. I don't care. I really don't care about his political career. And that's when it comes to political corruption, that's the way I feel about it. If, let the chips fall where they may. If it has an adverse impact on his political career, so be it.
Tom Brennan, investigator in the Greenberg case, which is now out of the hands of Josh Shapiro, and Tom hoping for a better outcome for the Greenberg family and for truth and justice. We'll be doing more of these interviews as we go along, but that's it for now. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for working in the interest that you're expressing in this case.